Today's daf be'ezras Hashem is Masechtas Zevachim Daf Lamed Zayin, and we will begin this fourth parak Beis Shammai. Let us begin over here. So Beis Shammai Yomer. Beis Shammai says, Beis Shammai Yomer. Beis Shammai says, Kol hanitonin al mizbeach hachitzon, any korban that you are supposed to place on the outside mizbeach. For example, let's say you have a korban oila and you're supposed to spray shtayim shein arba, as you can see in the picture. You spray on one corner, you throw the cup and one corner, and it sprays on two corners, because as you can see in the picture. So if shenasa b'matona achas, you did one gift, keeper, you were yotze. Basically, that was you fulfilled your obligation. Uva chatos, and a korban chatas, which is supposed to be brought on the four corners. You're supposed to go up the ramp and put your finger into the blood and touch all the four corners. So when do you fulfill your obligation? Even if you do shtei matanos, even if you do two gifts. So chatas, you need an extra. You need just two corners. As soon as you did two corners, you were yotze. Let's see if I have a picture of the mizbeach over here. Mizbeach has four corners. You can see it over here in this picture. You go up the ramp and you touch the blood on all four corners, the four corners. So Beis Shammai says, once you accomplish two of those corners, you accomplish the kapara. Beis Hillel says, Av chatas achas shenosona b'matona achas keeper, even a korban chatas that you did with one touching, you were yotze, you get the kapara. Lefichach, therefore, im nosan es rishona kisikna, v'shashnia chus luzmana keeper. Therefore, since you, according to Beis Hillel, you were yotze, let's say, with everything by the first gift of blood. So if you put the first gift of blood normally, that's the shnia, and then the second gift of blood, you said chutz luzmana. You said it, I'm going to think about it, a bad thought that I'm going to do beyond its time. Keeper, you were yotze, the korban is kosher, because just by giving one, it's the mitzvah has been done. The nasan is a rishayna chutz luzmana, but if you put the first one chutz luzmana, that's a shnia chutz l'mkaima, and the second one you did chutz l'mkaima. So by the first one doing it chutz l'zmana, the first blood going on the mizbeach, you had a bad thought. Pigel, you made it pigel, and if you eat the meat of that korban, you get a chiyav karas. Then the Mishnah says, Kol hanitonim al mizbeach hapnimi. If something that was supposed to give in on the mizbeach hapnimi, as you can see in the second base of Migdash, you walked into the temple, and some bloods had to be beyond these doors onto the mizbeach hapnimi, the inside mizbeach. So if that's the case, if you left and didn't do one of the gifts, you didn't get the kapara. So therefore, all four are important on the mizbeach hapnimi. If you gave all of them normally, and you did one of them not appropriately, right? You did one of them not appropriately. So therefore, Pesula, it's possible that by karas, it has no karas in it, because since you did the others correctly and only one of them you did incorrectly, so it's not a complete pigel. It's the korban is still invalid, but it doesn't make it pigel. Only if you would have a bad thought on all four corners of the mizbeach hapinimi. If you have a bad thought on all the matanos of the mizbeach hapnimi, then you can make it pigel. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. So here's the point. The point is that once you did one sprinkling on the mizbeach, even though the Torah requires, let's say, sometimes two, which is four, like you see, you are yotze just by giving one sprinkling. So Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, how do I know that something that was supposed to be gifted on the outside mizbeach, keeper, if you did just one gift, you were yotze? How do you know one is good enough? The pasuk says, the blood of all your korban, yishafech you can just spill it. And it seems to imply that just spilling it once, you will yaitze the kapara on the mizbeach. Says the Gemara, and this is the whole point of this daf. What is this pasuk? Is that what it's teaching you? That metona achas is good enough? Does that teach you this idea? I need this pasuk was dams to teach you another idea. We go to Lamed Zayin and Aleph. How do I know? How do I know that all the bloods, all carbonas, you need to pour the extra blood down by the yisoid, which is the yisoid over here. Here's the guy pointing it out, and then afterwards you spill out the blood by the two holes that are on the foundation of the mizbeach. You need the leftover blood in the cup. How do I know that? Says the pasuk, Talmud Bavli. The extra blood, spill it on the mizbeach. So how do you know that on any carbon, if you have extra blood in the cup, you spill it. You have to spill it down the drain which is on the mizbeach. It only says to do it by a carbon chassis, but how do I know by every other carbon that you have to do that? Nafkalei the Rebbe. I learned it from Rebbe. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Rabbi Yomi, Rebbe said, "V'hanisha badam yimotzei." There's an extra pasuk. She'ein Talmud loyme badam. It doesn't have to say the word badam because it already says about the malika of a bird, and it says the extra blood of a bird. You just squeeze it against the mizbeach. Ma Talmud loyme badam. What does it say badam? We only know by a carbon chatas, which needs to be gifted on the four corners of the mizbeach on top. There, the Torah tells you the extra blood you put down by the foundation. Shar damim minayin. How do I know any other carbon? Talmud loyma v'shnisha badam yimotzei. Shein Talmud loyma badam. Ma Talmud loyma badam. Limud. It teaches you akol hadamim shetunim matan damim leyasoid. I need all the bloods left over in the cup to be put onto by the foundation, by that yisoid. Therefore, I don't need v'dam zvachacha yishafech to teach you that idea. So therefore, v'dam zvachacha yishafech is extra to teach you that even one matan dam is good enough. Says the Gemara, okay, do I need it to teach you that idea? I need it to teach you another idea. How do I know? How do I know that a carbon that you're supposed to? Here's the picture. Let's say you're supposed to throw the blood on the mizbeach. You see, he's throwing the blood on the mizbeach over here. So how do I know that if he didn't throw the blood from a distance, but actually he poured it onto the mizbeach? He went very close up to the mizbeach and poured it. How do I know that's good enough? Talmud loyma. The pasuk says, "V'dam zvachacha yishafech," that every blood, if you spill it on the mizbeach, if you didn't throw it on the mizbeach, you didn't do zrika, which zrika means throwing it, but if you spill it, that's good enough. So this v'dam zvachacha yishafech teaches you another idea. Answers that spilling it on the mizbeach is good enough. Answers the Gemara, Savalak Rabbi Akiva. He held like Rabbi Akiva. That if the Torah requires you to throw the blood, pouring the blood is no good, because Rabbi Akiva says we don't learn that from that pasuk. Pouring the blood is no good. The Tanya, where do we see Rabbi Akiva holding this idea? Now we learned in the Mishnah, Beirach Birchas Ha Pesach, Pater Shazevach, like Pater Pesach. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. On Seder night, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, you had two karbanos in front of you. You had a shlamim, which required throwing on the mizbeach, throw the blood on the mizbeach, and you also had a carbon pesach, which you poured the blood on the mizbeach. So if you made a bracha on the carbon pesach, you're supposed to eat the shlamim first, and if you made the bracha on the shlamim with the bracha of the pesach, so the Rabbi Shmuel says, Pater Zevach, that's good enough bracha. Shel Zevach, if you make when you're supposed to eat the carbon pesach, you made the bracha of what you're supposed to bake on the shlamim, so you reversed the bracha, and instead of making Asher Kisham Tzvano Tzvano to eat the carbon pesach, you said Asher Kisham Tzvano to eat a shlamim, let's say, loy potas a pesach. You didn't fulfill your obligation. You have to remake the bracha. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. The point of this point is like this: a shlamim, which requires rika, it would be enough if you do shvicha. That's what the Gemara's understanding is, and therefore, every carbon shlamim is, in essence, has the same idea as a carbon pesach, and therefore, you can make the bracha on that carbon shlamim with the bracha of the carbon pesach, but not the reverse, because the carbon pesach only requires shvicha and not zrika. So again, according to Rabbi Shmuel, the way the Gemara learns, zrika, this carbon shlamim needs zrika, but b'di'eved you can use shvicha, and like you do by the carbon pesach. So this shlamim, you could actually make the bracha that you would make on a carbon pesach on the shlamim. That's the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. But Rabbi Kiva says loizu p'tarazu, loizu p'tarazu. They're two different carbonis, two different carbonis. A shlamim is not a pesach. A pesach is not a shlamim. A carbon shlamim needs a throwing, and a carbon pesach needs a pouring, and therefore Rabbi Kiva holds that pouring wouldn't be good enough. If you wouldn't be yaitze if you poured a carbon shlamim, the blood on the mizbeach. So therefore, the dams of v'chechi yishafech is extra, according to Rabbi Kiva, and that teaches you the other idea of matana achis is good enough. Says the Gemara, akati lahachi dasa. The Gemara still asks, I need v'dam v'chechi yishafech to teach you another idea. I needed to teach you the following. Rabbi Shmuel loimer because the pasuk says, ach b'char shar b'char kesef b'char eis. Torah tells you lamanu labachar shpan matan domim. The Eimerim Lagam Mizbeach, Masa Pesach Benayim. Torah only says that the Bechor needs to put the blood and the Eimerim on the Mizbeach. But how do I know carbon Meiser Behema, or carbon Pesach? The Torah never really tells you to put it on the Mizbeach and the Eimerim. The Torah doesn't tell you anything. Talmud Loima, V'dams V'checha Shafech. There's an extra pasuk that tells you V'dams V'checha Yishafech, that tells you that pour the carbon pesach, you're supposed to actually pour it on the mizbeach. That's the source that you know that the carbon pesach is supposed to be. Here the pasuk says, "Vasisa l'secha habasa v'adam al mizbeach Hashem l'kecha v'dam yizavachecha yishafech al mizbeach Hashem l'kecha." You spill the blood. What's the dam zavachecha yishafech teaching you? That's the idea that a carbon pesach, a meiser behema, you're actually supposed to pour the blood on the mizbeach. That's the point. Answers the Gemara, Sabala Rabbi Akiva, and Sabala Rabbi Yosef Glili. We hold like Rabbi Yosef Glili that we have another source that the blood of a carbon pesach is supposed to be brought in the mizbeach. How do I know? The time you learned to the Brisa, Rabbi Yosef Glili, Oima Domai, Leinema Ela Dama, Chelboy, Leinema Ela Chelba, Limet Al Chor, Masa Petrish, Toim Matan Dama, Ve'emril Gam Mizbeach. There's a pasuk that says, let's see if I have here. Here's the Zrika, by the way. We throw it. And here's shvicha, where you actually pouring it. Very different idea. Here the pasuk says, the Torah tells you on a bechor, you're supposed to split its bloods on the mizbeach, and the fats bring on the be makter on the mizbeach. So it's plural, damam and chalbam. Why does the Torah say plural? It teaches you that carbon pesach and carbon ma'aser behemer, their blood's also supposed to be poured on a mizbeach, and their chelbam are supposed to be also be makter on mizbeach. So therefore, dam zevachim shafech is extra, because that I learned that idea that carbon pesach is supposed to be put on the mizbeach from that pasuk. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel Haikra Mapaklei Lahachi Mapaklei Lahachi. Terei Tanoi, I'll leave it to Rabbi Shmuel. The Gemara just wants to understand how Rabbi Shmuel, right? He teaches you. The question is, he's using Lamadnu Shebechar. It only teaches you carbon. V'dam zevachim yishafech teaches you one idea, that a carbon pesach is supposed to be poured on the mizbeach, and he's also using the dam zevachim yishafech to teach you that that a carbon pesach and a carbon shlamim are one and the same, and therefore you can throw So this is the same idea. So how could Rabbi Shmuel use the dams of the Checha Yishafech to teach you two teachings? One that teaches you that the carbon pasach is supposed to be poured on the mizbeach. Another teaching, it teaches you that every carbon that needs rika, you could be yotze with shvika. And says the Gemara, Trei Tanai Libid Rabbi Shmuel. There are two Tanaim. We don't know exactly what Rabbi Shmuel says. Machlekes Tanaim, what Rabbi Shmuel says. Says the Gemara, Bishlam and Rabbi Shmuel, the Moikim like Kula B'Bechar. According to Shmuel, the whole pasuk over here is talking about Bechar. Bechar in Dav and Tizrek is all about Bechar, and the plural is because it's a Bechar Shar, Bechar Kesef, Bechar Eis. That's why it says plural in the pasuk. That's why the pasuk ends off. Ubsaram yilach. You can keep the basar. El Rabbana Rabbi Yossi Tamayklanami b'Masa Pesach. He says that pasuk is talking about also Meiser and Pesach. Masa Pesach Baalim Achlilei. The Meiser and Pesach belong to the Baalim. So what does the Psalm teach Yilach? The pasuk continues and says, and that end of that pasuk over there, their meat it belongs to the Kahanim. But if the pasuk is also referring to Masar and Carbon Pesach, how could the pasuk then go on and say their meats are only for the Kahanim? What's their meats going on? Answers the Gemara, it teaches you Echatam bechad balmum, whether a tam or balmum, limed, we go to Amid Beis, limed al bechar balmum shnit l'kayem, that a bechar that has a mum and cannot be brought on the mizbeach, that also is supposed to be given to the kohen. We don't find that idea in Kol HaTorah Kula. Rabbi Shmuel, how does Rabbi Shmuel know that? He knows it nafkele milchayir, you're the sefer. That there's another time it says l'chayiyah. It says again l'chayiyah. So that teaches you bechar balmum belong to a balmum belongs to the kohen. And bechar balmum, even though you're not bringing a mizbeach, it belongs to the kohen. And says now the Gemara says like this. So we're still using the dams v'checha yishafeh to teach me that just one sprinkling is good enough. So the Gemara asks one final question. Bishlam Rabbi Yosef Galili the Michael Nami b'Masa Pesach Hainu Ksiv Loy Sifta Ki Kodesh Hein Hein Krivim Bein Tmuras and Karevim. The Tnan Tmuras Bechar Hein Uvladon Vladon Atsoif Koladarius Hein Bechar Masa V'Yachlu b'Mumul Labalam Utnan. Amar Yeshua Shematish Tmuras Pesach Kreva Tmuras Pesach Ein Kreva Ve'Ein Li Lefarish. There's another pasuk. If this pasuk Ach Bechor Shar again, if this pasuk is referring to Ach Bechor Shar is referring to also a carbon Pesach and carbon Meiser Behema, so then the Torah is telling you another idea. It makes perfect sense. The Torah is telling you that the Tmura of a carbon Pesach are not brought up on the mizbeach. Let's say if a person makes a tumura of a regular carbon oila, for example, he has one oila and he says this oila should be like that, this animal should be like that. So then both of them are brought on the mizbeach, but you can't do that with a carbon pesa. So then the pasuk that ends off over there, loy sifta ki kodesh hein. So just like a bechor, you can't do that. Hein makrivim be'ein tumurasan kareva. A bechor cannot be only the bechor yamakriv, but not the Tmura could be makriv. You can't be makriv the Tmura of a Bechar. Same idea with a carbon Pesach. If the pasuk refers to a carbon Pesach, it's saying a carbon Pesach could be makriv, but you can't be makriv the Tmura. Ela Rabbi Shmuel the Michael Lakul Bechar, Meiser Behem like Krevi Tmurasa Manole. How do I know by Meiser Behem on Pesach that the Tmura you're not makriv? Answers the Gemara, Meiser Gamar Avara Mibechar. Pesach Behedyiksiv Kesef Matar Lomin Kesef L'Rabbis Tmurs Pesach Achapesh Kirushlomin Yachal Aflif Nea Pesach Kain Tamad Mehu. So they have Rabbi Shmuel has other psukim to teach you that by Meiser and by carbon Pesach only the carbon Pesach could be brought on the mizbeach, but not the Tmura. So we have another pasuk for that. And because of that, therefore, is Meiser, you have a Gzer Shava, Avar from the car, and Pesach, the Torah tells you specifically only the sheep of the original carbon Pesach is brought on the Mizbeach, but if you make a Tumura on this carbon Pesach, you say, oh, this should be like that, then that carbon Pesach will not be brought on the Mizbeach. Actually, you wait till it gets a mum, and then you redeem it, you buy with the money a brand new shlam. So bottom line is, again, we started this whole Gemara with this pasuk. How do I know that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree? How do you know one sprinkling is good enough for every carbon? Even though the Torah says 4 sprinklings, how do I know just one sprinkling is good enough? And Rabbi Hillel even says it's by achatas. So the Gemara says, we have a pasuk, the blood of your carbon you should spill out. And you could just sprinkle it once and then you're yaitza. So now the Gemara asks all the other Tanoim that use the dams for another drasha. So how do they know? If they use it for another drasha, how do you know that every carbon, if you do it once, it's good enough? And says the Gemara, and here we'll stop. They say, okay, I don't need dams v'checha yishafech to teach me that one sprinkling is good enough. I know that from a carbon chatas, one sprinkling is good enough, because that's how Beis Hillel, who disagrees with Beis Shammai, says even by a chatas, one sprinkling is good enough. One matan is good enough. And every other carbon, I'm going to learn from a chatas. Now tomorrow, we're going to learn where is the source of Beis Hillel that even by a chatas, it's matana achas, but whereas Beis Shammai learned by chatas, no, you need 2 matanas. One is not good enough. But everybody agrees by every other carbon, matana achas is good enough. Okay, we'll stop here.